Sign it, or I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. Not the house, not the money, not a single thing your grandmother meant for you to have. My mother said that to me on a Tuesday afternoon in October, standing in the kitchen of the house I grew up in, holding a document I had never seen before. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember the smell of the coffee she'd left on the burner too long. I remember thinking, she really means it. I didn't sign. I want to tell you how I got here because it matters. It matters that I was not some naive young woman who couldn't read a room. I'm a paralegal. I've spent 6 years working for an estate law firm in Ottawa. I know what a deed of transfer looks like. I know what undue influence means. I know intimately what families are capable of when money enters the picture. And still, I did not see it coming from my own. My grandmother passed away in late August. She was 81, sharp until almost the end, the kind of woman who kept her bank statements in color-coded binders and never once let anyone else handle her affairs. She'd built something real over her lifetime, a duplex in Gloucester she'd owned outright for decades, a modest investment portfolio, and about $340,000 in a registered savings account. Not a fortune by some standards. Enough to matter enormously by every standard I know. She left it to me, not to my mother, not split between the family. To me, specifically, her only grandchild, because, as her will stated, I was the one who had visited every Sunday for 4 years while she declined, the one who drove her to chemotherapy and sat with her through the bad afternoons, the one she trusted. Her lawyer, a careful older man with an office near the Rideau Center, had drafted the will 2 years before she died. It was clean, witnessed properly, filed. There was nothing ambiguous about it. My mother found out the week after the funeral. I know the exact moment things changed because I was there. We were at my aunt's house. My mother's younger sister, going through some of my grandmother's personal items. My aunt had been subdued all week, quieter than usual, not quite making eye contact. My mother had been doing the opposite, filling every silence, organizing, directing, performing a kind of controlled grief that I now understand was covering something else entirely. The lawyer called my cell while we were there. I stepped outside to take it. When I came back in, both of them were watching me from across the kitchen island, and the room felt different. I should have left then. I didn't. What followed was 3 weeks of pressure so incremental, I almost didn't recognize it as pressure at all. It started with suggestion. My mother mentioning, gently, that my grandmother had always intended the duplex to stay in the family. Meaning, I understood, meaning under her control. Then came the reframing. Wasn't it a lot for one person to manage alone? Didn't I have my hands full already with my job, my apartment, my own life? Then came the first mention of my cousin, my aunt's son, who had apparently been struggling financially, who could really use a hand, who family looked after family. I said I needed time to think. I meant it. I genuinely went home and sat with the discomfort of being the one who received everything, knowing other people were hurting. That was the first mistake. Not the sitting with it, the telling them I was sitting with it. Because what they heard was, she's wavering. The calls started every other day, then every day. My mother would phone in the evening, always after 9, always when I'd be tired from work and less defended. She had a way of talking that I can only describe as erosion. Not one big wave, just constant small water, wearing something down. She'd raise the subject sideways, through other things. How my aunt was struggling. How family was all we had. How my grandmother, God rest her, hadn't always understood the full picture. That last one was the tell. The moment she started gently suggesting my grandmother hadn't understood her own intentions, I knew something more calculated was happening. I started writing things down, every call, every conversation, the date, the time, what was said. Old habit from work, I'd document everything. I didn't know yet that I would need it. I was doing it almost automatically, the way you check that the stove is off even when you're fairly sure it's off. The document appeared 5 weeks after the funeral. My mother asked me to come for dinner. Just the two of us, she said. She wanted to talk things through. I came. I came because she is my mother, and because there was still a part of me that believed we could find our way to something reasonable. I sat down at the kitchen table and she put a folder in front of me. Inside was a transfer document, a deed, transferring the Gloucester duplex from my name into a joint ownership arrangement with my aunt. I looked at it for a long time. Where did this come from? I asked. She said a family friend had helped prepare it, someone she trusted. I asked who had authorized it. She said that was a technicality. I asked whether the estate had been settled yet. It hadn't, not fully, we were still in probate, and she said the details could be sorted out, that what mattered was the intention. I asked whether this had been run by the estate lawyer. She said it didn't need to be. I closed the folder. I told her I wasn't signing anything that night, or any night, without my own legal counsel reviewing it first. That was when she said what I told you at the beginning. Sign it, or she'd make sure I walked away with nothing. I want to be clear about how that moment felt. It didn't feel like a threat from a stranger. It felt like the floor dropping out from under a room I thought I knew. I have a particular memory of looking at the coffee maker on the counter. It was the same one she'd had since I was 12, and thinking that nothing in this kitchen looked the way it used to. I left without signing. In the car, I sat for a few minutes before starting the engine. My hands were steadier than I expected. I think when something confirms a fear you'd been quietly carrying, there's almost a strange calm in it. The uncertainty is gone. Now you know. I called my partner when I got home. He'd been watching me go through this for weeks, the nightly phone calls, the dinners that left me quieter than I arrived, the slow accumulation of pressure I kept minimizing. He listened to the whole thing. Then he said very carefully, "You know what you need to do." I did. I took the next day off work. I spent it at my own kitchen table, with the folder I'd kept from that dinner. I'd taken it with me when I left, almost without thinking, and every piece of documentation I'd collected since my grandmother's passing, the original will, the probate filings, my log of every conversation, the text messages my mother had sent that, reading them now in sequence, told a story I hadn't wanted to see. What I found once I was looking clearly was this. The transfer document my mother had presented was not drafted by a licensed paralegal or lawyer. The notarization was irregular, and buried in the phrasing was language that would have effectively removed me from any future claim on the estate. Not just the duplex, but everything. By citing a voluntary relinquishment. It was not a family arrangement. It was a trap. There was something else I needed to check, and it took me another day to confirm it. My grandmother's will named a secondary's executor, in addition to the estate lawyer, a family friend she had trusted for decades, a retired accountant named Mr. Bellamy who had known her since the 1980s. When I finally reached him, after leaving 2 voicemails, he told me something that made me sit down in the middle of my hallway. He had already been contacted by my mother. She had called him 2 weeks after the funeral, told him the family had reached a mutual agreement about the estate, and asked him to sign off on a modified distribution plan. He had not signed. Something in the conversation had struck him as off, but he had not called the lawyer either, because he hadn't wanted to create conflict. I told him everything. By the end of that call, he was very quiet. Then he said, "I'll call Howard, the estate lawyer, today." That was a Thursday. On Friday, I filed a complaint with the Law Society of Ontario regarding the individual who had drafted the fraudulent transfer document. On Saturday, I brought my documentation to a family law lawyer I'd found through a colleague, someone who did not know my family, who had no prior relationship with anyone involved. She reviewed everything and told me I had a case for attempted fraud on an estate and potentially elder financial abuse, given that some of the groundwork for this plan appeared to have been laid while my grandmother was still alive and in declining health. I went home and I kept my phone on silent. My mother called 11 times that weekend. My aunt called 4 times. There was one call from a number I didn't recognize that went to voicemail. When I listened to it, it was my aunt's son, my cousin, who I had not spoken to in almost 2 years, asking if we could talk and saying he was sorry about how things had gotten. I did not call any of them back. The following Wednesday, the estate lawyer contacted my mother directly. I was not on that call, but he told me later what happened. She initially denied any knowledge of the transfer document. When he read back to her the specific language it contained, language that mirrored her own phrasing from texts she had sent me, she changed her story. She said it had been a misunderstanding, that she had only been trying to protect the family, that I was making something out of nothing. The estate lawyer told her, in the measured way that lawyers do, that the matter was now under review. 2 days later, my aunt called my lawyer's office directly. I found out because my lawyer told me. My aunt, apparently, told her that she had not been aware of the full scope of what my mother had done, that she had known my mother was pushing for a renegotiation of the estate, but had not seen the document, had not known it would go as far as it did. She offered to provide a written statement. There it was, the moment the alliance cracked. My mother had been the architect. My aunt had been, at best, a willing accomplice who had let herself not ask too many questions. When it became clear that there were legal consequences on the table, my aunt chose herself. I can't say I was surprised. I can't say I wasn't hurt anyway. The fraud investigation took about 4 months. During that time, I did not speak to my mother. I did not attend Christmas. The first Christmas in my adult life I had spent away from her. And I went to my partner's family instead, in Kingston, and sat at their table and felt an extraordinary mixture of loss and relief that I still don't entirely know how to describe. His mother put a hand on my arm at one point and didn't say anything. That was exactly right. In February, the individual who had drafted the fraudulent document, someone I had never met, a notary my mother had apparently found through an old work connection, had his certification suspended pending investigation. My mother received a formal legal notice. The estate was fully settled in March, exactly as my grandmother had intended. I own a duplex in Gloucester now. It's a small brick building, 2 units, with a backyard that has a very old apple tree my grandmother planted in 1987. The tenants in the lower unit have been there for 9 years. The upper unit was empty when the estate settled, and I spent 2 weekends in April painting it myself. The walls, the trim, the inside of the closet doors, which is something my grandmother always did too, the inside of the closet doors, because she said it mattered even when no one would see it. I don't know what my mother thought was going to happen. I don't know if she thought I wouldn't look at the documents, or that I would feel guilty enough to sign, or that she had found some angle I wouldn't know how to counter. Maybe she thought that love, the particular loyalty a daughter has for her mother, the instinct that this person is safe, this person would not. Maybe she thought that would be enough to stop me from looking clearly at what was in front of me. She was wrong. I have been asked, by people who know the whole story, whether I'm angry. The honest answer is that I was for a long time. I was angry the way you're angry when you discover that something you thought was solid was never what it appeared to be. But somewhere in the 4 months of waiting, somewhere in the hours at my kitchen table with folders full of paper, the anger shifted into something quieter. Not forgiveness. I want to be careful about that word, because I don't think I'm there, and I think it's dishonest to claim you've arrived somewhere you haven't. Something more like clarity. I can see her now as a person who wanted something and chose a method that was wrong, and I can understand the wanting without excusing the method. My grandmother knew who she was leaving things to. She chose clearly and deliberately. She picked me not because she loved me more than her own daughter. I don't think that's what it was, but because she had watched, over 4 years of Sunday visits and chemotherapy waiting rooms, who showed up. That's all it was. She was keeping track of who showed up. The apple tree is blooming now. I can see it from the upper unit window. Last week, I stood there with a cup of tea and looked at it for a long time, and I thought about how she planted it the same year I was born, and how she never once mentioned that to me, and how I only know it because I found the receipt in her files. Some things you carry forward without knowing what they cost, until you find the receipt.